This is Rooted in Oregon. Oaktree, the Oregon Clinical and Translational Research Institute, would like to present Episode 1, Meet Our Directors. Welcome to our podcast, Rooted in Oregon, What Oaktree Can Provide to Me. I'm your host, Madeline Cresswell. I'm excited to share with you stories that illustrate our mission, supporting the translation of research ideas into tangible results and expediting effective treatments to people who need them. Oaktree strives to be a leader in scientific innovation in Oregon and beyond. Today I'm talking with Dr. David Ellison and Dr. Cindy Morris. They are here to tell you more about what Oaktree is and how we can support you. David, Cindy, thank you for joining me today. I'd like you both to first introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your background and your current role or roles at OHSU.
So my name is David Ellison. I trained as a kidney doctor. We called them nephrologists. And I was a director of the Division of Nephrology and Hypertension for 13 years here at OHSU before joining Oaktree. I have also run a early stage translational science laboratory that's been investigating the interface between molecular genetics and dietary intake in the genesis of hypertension, and I've been doing that for many, many years. So I first got introduced to Oaktree by its founding director, Eric Orwall, who approached me a number of years ago trying to increase the strength of Oaktree in the area of early phase translational research. And he asked me to join first as an associate director, and then shortly after that he announced that he was ready to step down from his position as director, and he was wondering if I might be interested in that position. And by that time it was hard for me to say no, so I said yes. And that was about 5 years ago, and been with Oaktree ever since then.
That's great. And how about you, Cindy?
All right, I'm Cindy Morris. I've been here at OHSU my entire career. I even started working at OHSU when I was in college as a student. I am an epidemiologist, and so my interest throughout my career has been studying the pattern of disease in populations, and in particular, how that may influence treatment decisions. So I had the opportunity about 20 years ago now to lead a new program that was being developed by NIH and to develop a program for clinical and translational education. So as many people know, when many scientists train either in basic science or physicians train in medical school, there's no education on how to do research, particularly in human populations. And as someone who had done that for their entire career to that point, it was a pleasure to be able to create a curriculum in line with about 50 different institutions around the country to develop what has become a well-defined curriculum, things that every clinical and translational researcher needs to know. Because I had been in that space for a number of years, when the chance to apply to the CTSA for this infrastructure award came available in 2006, I was on board right away.
That's awesome. So you mentioned CTSAs. Can you explain to our listeners a little bit more about those?
Sure. A CTSA, as it stands for Clinical Translational Science Award. And this is really an infrastructure grant that is set up by NIH to expedite how research is done, to make it more efficient, to think about how researchers are trained, to think about ways to improve recruiting, how we handle data security, how patients are seen in clinic, and really to improve the process and flow of translation of basic science findings to the clinical space, or sometimes the opposite direction.
Yeah, the CTSA program was developed under the guidance of Elias Zerhouni, who is the head of NIH in, I guess, the early 2000s. And it was specifically designed to address this problem of what's been called the Valley of Death, which originally was envisioned as this valley between outstanding work being done in the basic science laboratory and the fact that that work was not being translated into new treatments and prevention strategies for patients. Since that time, I think the idea of the Valley of Death has been broadened to include another Valley of Death, which is the translation between the discovery of new prevention techniques and new therapies and their effective implementation across the population. So these days we envision two valleys of death. And I think the CTSA network is designed and we hope is actually helping to bridge both of those valleys.
So it sounds like there's a big mission, big problem we're trying to solve here. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what our CTSA specifically offers, what Oaktree can provide to our investigators and researchers here at OHSU?
We offer a number of programs, many of which are actually specified in our grant that we must offer. And these span a spectrum from educational programs to programs where actually research is done on our infrastructure. And maybe I'll start at the end. So one of the things that we do is we support the Clinical and Translational Research Center, which is an inpatient, outpatient unit that allows investigators to do studies on patients, whether they involve infusions. One of the unique aspects of our CTRC is that we have circadian rhythm study rooms that are environmentally protected so that individuals can be in those rooms for weeks at a time without knowing what time of day it is, so people can do circadian rhythm studies. We can do early phase studies of drugs there. We also offer a number of other programs, the other signature programs that are really offered by all CTSAs, but we offer these as well, include support for informatics, biomedical informatics, and clinical research informatics. We offer support for biostatistics. We have a pilot award program, and especially our biomedical innovation program that's been very successful in translating ideas that clinicians have into potential marketable technologies. We have outstanding educational programs that perhaps Cindy can talk more about in a minute. We also have a optional module as part of our grant, and in this case it's the Health Experiences Research Network, which is designed to help more formally query the patient voice in representing certain disease processes. So they're interviewing patients with certain kinds of diseases and then cataloging those responses so that it becomes clear what patients experience when they have, for example, pediatric cancer, and to find out what the experience is like for those kind of patients. So those are some of the programs we offer.
Let me offer a specific example. Let me walk through how we have helped an early investigator in their career to get to where they are today. And I'm going to use Dr. Eric Simpson as an example of that. I was first contacted by Eric back in about 2004 when he had a very specifically focused research idea, but he needed to learn how the process of answering that question. So he came and participated in our education programs, got a master's degree, and by the end of that, we worked alongside him to get a career development award. Once he was successful in getting that award, after 5 years, we, through Oaktree, provided him with all different types of services so that he could apply for national funding from NIH for a multi-center trial. That included working with people from our informatics group to help design the data collection methods and tools that would allow everything from collecting consent from patients electronically to having them fill out information and use their smartphone, as an example, to collect data. Our community group, so that he could recruit 25 different small clinics around the country to participate in the clinical trial he wanted to design. Our clinical research design team, who worked with him hand in hand to develop the protocol and to apply for funding. And then once he actually received this grant, now we help him do the study. And so biostatistics works with him to analyze some of the data from the study. Our clinical research informatics team helps collect the data and monitor it over time. So in every regard, Oaktree has worked with him to make his idea and question into reality.
That's a great example. So it sounds like we help a lot of investigators like him, and we have a lot of services that we can provide any investigator at any step in their career. So could each of you please share your own vision for clinical research at OHSU and how Oaktree plays into that?
Well, clinical research is essential to everything that happens in an academic medical center like OHSU. We should be able to use all the patient encounters to improve care for patients. How can we better treat patients who come with a variety of different illnesses, and to use the accumulated data to answer those questions, as well as to help our faculty answer the questions. Faculty are here at OHSU for a reason, and one of those important reasons is because they aren't content just to provide clinical care on a day-to-day basis. They have important ways that they want to push the field forward to improve care for patients. And I think that, to me, is the real mission of Oaktree and clinical research at OHSU, to improve patient care and care of the community in everything that we do.
Maybe I'll play that out a little bit with a specific example from my own life of how translational research has impacted me, and I think that this actually exemplifies exactly what Cindy was saying. So early on in my career, before I was here, it was the beginnings of the AIDS epidemic, and I was rounding with a fellow at Yale University at that time, and he noticed that many of the patients we were seeing with AIDS were developing high blood potassium levels, hyperkalemia, and we didn't know why. And my mentor at the time had heard something about an antibiotic called Bactrim causing hyperkalemia, and maybe by interacting with channels that we were studying. So we decided to do two parts of a study, which some of it we took back into the laboratory, and we did some studies of ion channels using experimental animals, and were able to show that a component of Bactrim blocked sodium channels, and that would at least explain the hyperkalemia. And then we did a case series of patients who were actually receiving high doses of this antibiotic Bactrim, and showed that while they were on the Bactrim that their potassium levels were going up, and then when they were taken off the Bactrim, their potassium levels came down. So that was an early example for me of how you could take a clinical problem that we actually saw on the wards, that when we were seeing it, people didn't know the answer to, and then ask the question of why is that occurring? And we now know that this is a common side effect of this drug, and we know to avoid it and to prevent it. And so I think that my vision for clinical and translational research has a lot to do with that kind of experience, to encourage people across OHSU who are especially involved in either clinical care or public health, who see a problem in front of themselves, to realize that they themselves can actually investigate that problem and maybe learn to either prevent the problem or treat the problem. I think that's one of the most satisfying experiences that a person can have as a patient caregiver or a clinician.
And so it sounds like you hope that Oaktree can help those investigators start off on the right foot and know that we're here to support those missions.
Absolutely. The goal of Oaktree is to make all that easier so that people can do it more efficiently and hopefully very happily and enjoy the experience.
Great. So if you guys had to leave our listeners with one thing to know about Oaktree, what would it be?
Call the Navigators.
I appreciate the shout out.
Navigators can help you with your specific problems and direct you to exactly the place you need to get to find your answers.
Actually, my response would be essentially the same thing. Basically, it's we're here to help you, and we have an intake valve for any kind of question or problem you have, and that's the Oaktree Navigators. And I think the team is very receptive to all types of inquiries and will point people in the right directions. And hopefully some of them will end up like Eric Simpson as a successful nationally funded investigator doing an important trial.
Well, great. And as one of the Navigators, I am here to help anyone out there, and we're ready for your inquiries, and we're ready to help translate clinical science at OHSU and support our grant and support this institution and medical discoveries. So thank you both very much for joining us here on Rooted in Oregon, Episode 1.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline.
This podcast was brought to you by Oaktree. We are here to help. Feel free to learn more by visiting our website at ohsu.edu/Oaktree or contacting us at oaktree@ohsu.edu. Oaktree is funded by the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, specifically the Clinical and Translational Science Award Program. Please remember to cite us using grant number UL1 TR0 02369.